Mike Kent with the last of a series of videos. One video on menus, 4 videos on sub-procedures and functions. We want to look at details of parameter passing with procedures now. I'm going to open this example up. And sub-functions, functions can only return one value, which is a limitation. Subs, we can have a whole bunch of parameters. Some of them are input and some of them are output. So if you look at my lecture notes, I actually have a diagram that, here, let me pop it up. I have this diagram that shows the relationship between payroll and the button calculate click. So we input our hours and rate from the text boxes in button calculate click, and we're going to pass in hours and rates to payroll, and then the outputs from payroll are going to be regular time and overtime pay. So let me go back to Visual Studio and we can look at how that happens. So we got our payroll button, which is going to use a sub-procedure this time instead of a function to get around the limitation of returning one thing. So since we're getting around that, we can go back to returning regular pay and overtime pay separately. And I still got Mike's pay, calling the same sub, and then the get out of here button has not changed. I'm going to double click on payroll to bring up the code window so we can look at button calculate click. So button calculate click has the same variables that we've seen before. It has the exact same function for doing the error checking. Once we got past the error check, we can decimal.parse our hours and rate. But here is the difference. I'm going to separate that a little bit. Payroll, I'm going to be calling a sub called payroll. I'm going to be sending it 4 variables: hours, rate, des regular, des overtime. So there's going to be 4 things going to payroll now. We're going to send in the hours and rates, and payroll is going to send back regular pay and overtime pay, just like I showed you in this diagram. We're sending in hours and rate, it's returning regular pay and overtime pay. Let's look at how that works. Let's go scroll down in the window till we get to payroll. So now we've got sub payroll. I've got my 4 parameters listed, and I broke them onto separate lines by using spacebar underscore, just so they'd line up real nice. And you notice the first 2 are by val and the last 2 are by reference. Well, in computer science lingo, this is call by value. This parameter is call by value. That's des_h is call by value, which means call by copy. It's sometimes called call by copy. These are input only. They go in to the sub, but the changes cannot come out. Now you notice the last 2 are by reference, which means call by reference. That means these variables come into the sub, can be changed by the subs, and whatever changes this sub makes to them, it comes back out to the function or procedure or sub that called it. So all of this code is identical. It has not changed, but you notice I don't have to have a return statement. You only do a return statement if it's a function and you say what you're returning, one thing. The other thing you'll notice is there's nothing after my close parenthesis. That's because I don't have to set a return value. I'm sending back des regular pay as decimal, and I'm sending back des OT as decimal because they're by reference. So the math is identical, and you notice I'm setting a value for des reg, I'm setting a value for des OT. It sets those values, and when it hits in sub, that's what goes back out. So I'm going to scroll up here, and I'm going to hit a breakpoint on payroll, and then we can start the program. And I'll put in the same pay rate we've been seeing before. As soon as it pops up, there, it's popped up. I'm going to type in 60 hours, $30 an hour, and I'm going to hit payroll. Now it hit my breakpoint. I clicked on the code window to bring it to the front. I'm on payroll. So right now it has not gone into payroll. Hours has 60, des hours. Rate has 30. Des regular has 0. And des overtime has 0. So I'm sending in 60, 30, 0, 0. Now, once again on your debug menu, you want to say step into, which is F11. Now I'm in sub payroll. Now remember, you don't have to name your parameters the same as what you called them when you passed them in, when you passed the variables in. Here I just called it des_h. The first thing being passed in, I'm calling des_h. That has a 60. Second thing I'm passing in is des_r. It has a 30. You'll notice des regular has a 0. And des_ot has a 0. So if I keep stepping through this code, it says, oh yeah, you're working overtime, it's greater than 40, so my regular pay is $1,200. Then it's going to calculate my overtime pay, which is hours minus 20, minus 40, which will leave 20, times rate times 1.5. So $30 an hour times 1.5, I'm getting $45 an hour for my overtime. So that's $900. That's going to send $1,200 back for regular, $900 back for OT. As I keep stepping, it hits end sub, jumps back to where it came from. Now you'll see des hours has 60 still, rate has 30. Regular went into the sub when it called payroll as a 0, comes back out as 1,200. Des overtime went into the sub as a 0, comes back out as a 900. Add the two together to get my total pay. Put it in the labels, and now you see regular pay was 1,200, overtime pay was 900, total pay 2,100. I'm going to exit the program now. Let's tell it to stop. And that is what's going on with payroll. So the things to remember is when you declare your parameters, you've got to decide what's an input. If it's an input, you make it by val. So hours and rate are an input. Payroll should not be changing hours and rate. However, payroll needs to send out regular pay and OT, overtime pay. So they need to be by ref. Now, just to show you, once again, if I was to change des_h equals 90,000 right here, or 900,000, what the heck. Let's see what happens when I run the program now, because I'm changing one of the by vals. Do you think that's going to go back out? Well, let's find out. Let's experiment with the debugger. I'm going to run the program. I'm just going to press the shortcut key F5. I'm going to put in the same thing I put in before. 60 hours, $30 an hour, payroll. Oh, I got rid of my breakpoint. That's not good. Let's come up here, put my breakpoint back in, go back to my program. Now I'm going to hit payroll. Now it pauses. It's getting ready to send in 60 for hours, 30 for rate, 0, 0. So F11 to step in. It's going to come down here, do my calculations. So now regular pay is going to be 1,200, overtime is going to be 900. Des_h right now is 60. As soon as I run this line of code, inside this sub it's now 90,000. So you can change the value of all the parameters passed in. In the sub, it doesn't matter. If you say by val, it ain't coming out. So that's defensive programming, because if a value gets changed in a sub that should not have gotten changed and it can come back out, that creates what we call a side effect. And side effects create very bizarre bugs, because you're looking at your code where you're calling somebody else's function or sub and you don't see any errors. And you don't realize that they have changed the value of your variable in their sub when they should not have. So defensive programming is designing your parameters to decide if they need to be inputs, in which case you say by val, or if they need to be outputs by reference. So, going back to that diagram, these two parameters are going in. They're input only, so they're going to be by val. The two that need to come out are going to be by ref. I'm going to finish stepping through this. I'm going to step back to the main program, and you can see that ours did not come out changed. Even though I changed it to 90,000 inside payroll, because this was by val, it did not come back out. These two did. That was the regular pay and overtime pay, which I needed to come out so I could stuff them into the labels and we could see how much money we're making. That is how you pass parameters. Now, if I look at Mike's pay just briefly, you can see what I'm doing here is I'm passing in 30 and 900, and I'm going to accept back regular pay and overtime pay. I'm still calling payroll. I'm calling it from a different place. I'm passing it different numbers. So payroll can be used from one button or two buttons or five buttons or all kinds of places. It's allowing me to put all that payroll code in one place so I don't repeat the code in multiple places. That is the last of my videos on parameter passing. Parameter passing is the hardest thing we will do this semester. Look at my notes, look at my example code, step through it with the debugger, watch these videos again if you need to. It's important that you understand this. Now the good news is the material we do after parameter passing, functions and subs, gets a little easier again. So it's not going to be quite as hard after this. If you can get through this, you're over the hump. You're going to finish the class up well. Thanks a lot.